So
it just sounds like any direct injected early run of a two-stroke was just pretty shaky. I mean, if all of them had that kind of reputation at the beginning, but then as you really start to look into it, all that fades away after like a couple years into their production run. Like everybody has nothing but good things to say about them after those particular issues were ironed out.
yeah, that's true. I mean, the Optimax ended up being actually a very reliable engine, but I guess it also depends on what your definition of reliability and unreliable really is.
Well, yeah, because that's interesting that you bring that up, because I guess the way I would look at reliability is generally, can I go out and make it back, right?
Yeah.
And last a couple years. Now, yeah, I get that power head's blowing.
I mean, a couple of years. I hope you want more than a couple of years out of your engine.
Well, you're right. But I mean, I understand that power heads blowing left and right is, it can be perceived as unreliable, but really by the end of the production run of that engine, was it all that unreliable, or was it just that its early reputation was so bad that there was no saving it? I mean, I feel like that, and the fact that four strokes were already kind of getting into place for replacing the two stroke,
taking over the market.
Yeah, people were just like, man, I don't want nothing to do with this anymore. Just get rid of those things. Let the four stroke take over.
Yeah, that's probably exactly right. I don't know, because I didn't really work on that many fixes after that. I mean, once they got that reputation, and it didn't take long for people to not even want it. It was almost like the beginning of the demise of an entire company. So
yeah,
that the popping of the power heads really, yeah, it destroyed it. And I think it was just also such a complex engine that it just constantly failed. And then there was very limited mechanics to even work on it, because just like the Optimax and the HPDI, if you don't have a competent mechanic that knows about the engine and how the systems function and how that engine operates, then, anybody could make they could make a blunder out of that engine if they try and fix it, and they have no idea what they're doing, because the systems are very precise in the way they operate. Like you said, it's a direct injection two-stroke. So like on an Optimax, you've got an air compressor, you've got air injectors, you've got fuel injectors. On the HPDI, you've got a lot of different filters. You got a high pressure pump. You got close to 2,000 PSI of fuel pressure. So if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what you're looking at and how the thing operates, you really don't have a place to start to fix it. So then you have a problem with this engine. You take it to somebody. They don't know what they're doing. And then they get in there and just start taking stuff apart, start screwing this, screwing that, messing with this, messing with that. Next thing you know, you can't get the engine to run right anymore because they just messed it all up. So that probably added to the reputation of being notoriously unreliable. So does that make them truly unreliable? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think this is a whole conversation about, like you said, what's notoriously unreliable and what's reliable and what makes it unreliable. And we should probably even just go engine to engine and, kind of talk about each one.
Yeah. I mean, you can bring up, first of all, the E-Tech, which was, it came right after the FICT, right? That was like the FICT was its predecessor. It was the originator of the direct injected two-stroke. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, the E-Tech, yeah.
Probably. Well, that E-Tech, did it have a lot of problems with blowing power heads, or were the problems mainly just parts going out and availability or price being an issue?
The E-Tech is its own thing altogether, because I think what makes the E-Tech for most people, I think what it has this notoriously unreliable reputation too, mainly because it's so inconsistent. Like if you have an E-Tech, let's say you've got 1,000 E-Techs. 500 of them are just going to be nothing but problems. And then the other 500 are going to be the most bulletproof, perfect engines you've ever had. I mean, I've seen people take an E-Tech and have like nothing. They don't do anything to it. I mean, they'll run it for 6-7 years. No impellers, no thermostats, no nothing. They put a set of plugs in it and make sure it's got good fuel. That's it. Like I've seen people let one sit for 3 years, come back. I mean, they had, good treated fuel, but they come back, put a battery in the boat, boom, start the thing up, fires up first time, and they just roll out like no issues. And then I've also seen other people that have, the ECUs, the injectors, the thermostat housings, some of the water jacket things. Like it's just nonstop legitimate issues that they have with the engine.
Those injectors were always, I mean, that's the first thing I always hear about.
Yeah.
Is the reason why you stay away from an E-Tech is the injectors. Because why is it? They're serialized? What exactly does that mean? So it only works on one particular cylinder, or for one particular cylinder on one particular engine?
Pretty much the way it is that if you have an injector, you have to change the injector, right? So each injector has its own serial number that works with that ECU. And so in order to, like if you have an injector that you got to change out, you have to have the computer and the software and all the stuff in order to, like, I guess you could say match them, so that way that they work together. And I mean, if you're not an Evinrude dealer, which they're far and few between now, obviously because they,
went out of business.
Right. But before that, you would have people that would have problems with injectors, and they would have to go find a dealer that had the software and the computer to put it on there and then do, what they do to match everything up to make it work properly, which to me is just...
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous. So, like, you can't just order a cylinder 3 injector, put it in yourself, and get it to work.
No.
You need to hook up the computer,
Yes.
match the serial numbers, do all that,
Yes.
just to get it to work right?
Yes.
I mean, considering there's not a whole lot of Evinrude or E-Tech mechanics around anymore, that's a huge problem. What does an injector even cost?
They're pretty expensive too. They're not.
Can you get your hands on one like pretty accessibly, or is it?
I don't know. Availability might be hard now. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really tried to order an injector for an E-Tech in quite a while, so
Yeah.
whether they're available or not, I don't know. It's possible, but it's also probably not possible, and they might be super expensive. So I guess that means it's the complexity of that entire system that makes people not want to deal with them. Because you have one person that has a bad, issue there, it turns into this whole ordeal where, like, he gets a bad batch of fuel, messes up an injector. There's no Evinrude dealer within 100 miles of the guy. He's got to tow his boat, 100 miles to a dealer. Get this done. They charges him $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to get his boat running, and it takes a month. So, like, that whole process will just ruin someone's experience to the point where, people that have a good experience with something, they don't really say anything. No one complains when things are good. It's not until they had this horrible experience that calls someone to action to actually be like, go out and publicize how bad of an experience they had. Because, I mean, face it, everybody wants some sympathy or some,
Right.
you want to tell people, you're like, dude, this is horrible. Like, this is a horrible experience, so I want to tell somebody about it.
Yeah, when you start having 5-digit price tag mistakes constantly breaking on you, it's just, I could see how it'll build a pretty bad reputation. But
Well, that also probably ties into why you've got such a bad, such a good mixture. Because then there's the other people that have had nothing, like, they don't do anything to the engine at all, and
Right.
it just works.
right, I was gonna say it's a very split camp. It's like because I'm not old enough to have worked on a lot of these engines, but I've heard the fair share of stories and all the nightmares that go along with these engines, and you always hear how unreliable they are. But then if you ever get curious and start looking it up, like what made it unreliable? And you start digging into forums and see there is a lot of people who are passionate about those engines that say they're not unreliable. They're really good engines, and every engine has lemons, or like, you know, it's, I don't know. It's kind of difficult. I think that all three of them, it's like the big three, that the HPDI 250, 300, the Opti Pops, and the FIC, them old early direct injected two strokes had such bad early runs that it failed to save the two stroke. It left a sour taste in a majority of people's mouths. And even though there were the occasional good ones, it just wasn't enough to keep them alive, you know?
Yeah, the Optimax is kind of a good, you know, comparison there, because, you know, it was the OptiPop, and the OptiPop, the true OptiPop, was from like 1997 until I think 2001. So after like 2002, they pretty much ironed out all those problems, and a lot of them was problems with oil or overheat, stuff like that, where it would blow up the engine because it wouldn't getting oil, or it would overheat and have an issue there. So once you got, like, if you have a 2009 Optimax, that's not an OptiPop. And someone that's still mad about OptiPops, it's like those engines for the most part are all gone. Now, you know, if you have a 97 to 01 Optimax, that's considered an OptiPop. But outside of that, I mean, they made the Optimax all the way up until like the V6, V8 when that came out, like, I don't know, 2016 or something, 17,
wow,
18 maybe.
Yeah, I know the Optimax had a pretty long run, and I've never known the Optimax to be an unreliable engine up until really recently. When you start digging into it, people really dog on the OptiPop. But I guess just after those couple of years, it was actually a really good engine. I've never.
Well, that's kind of where it gets interesting, because you take that Optimax, you know, you got 1,000 Optimaxes, and you might have 25 that are, you know, you'll find 25 people that either had an OptiPop experience, or if they didn't, then they bought, you know, a 2002 to the end of the run of the engine. If you pool those people together, it's going to be like an 80-20 split, where 80% of the people never had those issues.
Yeah.
The other 20% had that bad issue. Whereas when it goes back to the E-Tech, it's a 50-50 split. And that's what's amazing about the E-Tech, is that I've never seen anything that has such a far, like, it's either all the way
to one extreme or the other.
Yeah.
There's no in between.
No in between for that engine. There's either I love it or I hate it.
That's really weird.
Now, if you like this video, you can watch the full episode over here, or you can watch another clip over here.